What is the most used man-made material on Earth? You guessed right, it's concrete. Look around. It's everywhere. Sidewalks, driveways, foundations, floors you stand on, and even entire buildings are made out of concrete. So why don't we discuss it more? In each episode of Concrete Logic, we will explore one concrete-related topic with the help from industry professionals that are shaping the future of the trade. We'll talk with suppliers, contractors, architects, engineers, specialists, and even some proponents of competing materials about their views of concrete and their vision of its future. And welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic podcast. And today I have Chris Bennett with me. Chris, can you give a short intro about yourself and your company?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Seth. My name's Chris Bennett, and I am the founder-owner of Bennett Build. We're a concrete consultancy. We represent owners, design groups, and helping oversee documentation and installation to lower budget, lower carbon, lower schedule.
Yeah. So we've been communicating over LinkedIn and have shared interest on what's going on with concrete and the efforts to lower its carbon footprint and the different things that are out there and things that may be concerning to several of us, and just want to make sure that we're going down the right path. So do you want to kind of share, I guess, first of all, when folks reach out to you and your company, I guess, what is it, a concrete contractor? Is it an owner's rep? Who's reaching out to you?
Sure. I would say most of the time it's either someone from owner or design side, so a developer, project management company, or an architectural or engineering firm. And then from there, get introduced to the rest of the team. I have had a lot of experience with training for making with contractors for not only the drawings and the specification, but a hands-on approach, sort of marrying all three together. And we've done that successfully at University of Alberta, up in Canada, most recently with University of Akron NSERCamp and the National Concrete and Corrosion Symposiums for the last few years. But then also locally, different Construction Specification Institute chapter meetings, regional sorts of events, ISCS, International Society for Construction Sciences, things like that. So we'll take that idea of education, not just in a project scenario, but outside of it, just like why we're together today, so that you can talk about things, go through thinking, why is a specification written this way? And have those sometimes heated, but always educational moments that you just can't have under a project condition.
Right. So before we hit record, you were going to tell me about the Cobra effect of what's going on right now in the concrete industry, and you asked me if I knew what that was, and I did not. So could you please explain?
Sure. So and I don't know, let me preface this, Seth, with I don't know how much of it's true. It's one of those tales that gets passed down, right? But the Cobra effect, simply put, is about taking too simple of solutions to complex problems and then making the problem worse. And the original story, I think it's supposed to take place in colonial India. So India, like 150 years ago, under British rule, and they had this problem with cobras, all these venomous snakes. And the local magistrates, the local colonial powers said, if we put a bounty and pay money for every snake that's killed and brought in, we're going to get rid of our snake problem, right? We got too many snakes, so we're going to kill them. Simple solution, right? And so it was very, very effective. And then over time, they noticed that they were getting more and more cobras brought in. And they're like, man, like, we're killing so many cobras. How could there possibly be even more in second quarter and third quarter or whatever? And it turns out that some very entrepreneurial locals said, wow, I can get, whatever it is, X amount of bucks for a cobra, so I'm going to start cobra farming. And that way I can bring in a whole wheelbarrow full of cobras and get, even more money. And so the British said, well, that's not right, so we're going to discontinue the bounty. And then with this lack of economic incentive, all these guys were like, oh, I'm not paying for the snake's upkeep, and they released them. So at the end of this policy, they not only had a snake problem, but it was actually worse. And so that's, in a nutshell, that's the Cobra effect story. And one of the similarities that I see in the last, particularly 2 years, but certainly before then, is this emphasis on low carbon concrete. And there is this knee-jerk reaction that is to simply remove cement and replace the cement with something else. And it isn't, and it's usually, there's a famous specification, the Marin County style specification that's lauded as a great roadmap. And it is, but it isn't. It tells you to take out cement, and it tells you to essentially replace it with slag or fly ash. And there's nothing wrong with slag or fly ash in moderation. But when you completely change the materiality of the concrete, that's okay as long as you're updating your approach to curing and your approach to construction. It's so people do not realize, I think, or maybe appreciate, of how different a material change that is. I was talking with a real estate financial group, and they've got this benchmark for 70% replacement of cement with slag. And they're going to teach, all their project managers how to update their specs. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot of slag, and slag is very alkaline. That's going to have some changes. And you've got less cement, so you're going to have less hydration potentially. And slag is also dependent on cement reacting, right? It's, whether you call it a secondary cement or cementitious material, slag, like fly ash and some of those other dryad pozzolans, have to wait for cement to do its thing before they become beneficial. And so I asked, well, how are you preparing, your design teams? How are you preparing, what are we doing with our constructors out in the market to prepare them for that mighty big, sweep of the pen? And the answer was nothing. And I'm on some pretty large projects and some small projects across the country. And anytime that I have been a part of a project where you've got these massive removal of cement, and you're replacing it, with fly ash or slag, but also, silica fume, things like that, you get massive problems with dry shrink, deflection, your undulation, your curling, all becomes, the problems become exacerbated. And so all of a sudden you've got this, low carbon slab, but it's curled up, right? And so before you can put your tilt-up walls, you've got to mow down all of your edges so it's going to fit in there now. Well, is that really sustainable? The fact that we've now got to put, some sort of epoxy or some sort of resinous material to kind of glue that slab back together. What's the embodied carbon on that? And are we including that in our formulations? And again, I don't think that it comes from a place that is not well intended. I think everybody is trying to remove cement from a place where they believe that I'm going to build more sustainable concrete. I don't think anybody's trying to make bad decisions. It's just not. It's just too simple of a fix for a pretty complicated problem. Um, and I would say also, and I'd be curious to find out what's happening in your neck of the woods on this. You know, with this increased demand for slag and fly ash, everybody's running out of it. You know, and there's transportation issues too. But even in a place like Missouri, right, where they've got, was it like 2 or 3 coal plants, and historically never have a fly ash problem. You've got ready mix suppliers hopefully telling people, but maybe not, that they're adding slag to the mix because they don't have enough fly ash. That's how much the demand has happened. I've talked with airports, large builders with, you know, just billion-dollar pipelines, and everybody is waiting on fly ash to hit, you know, Corpus Christi coming from, you know, South Korea or China, and that, you know, and I start thinking, I'm like, number one, how did that fly ash mix get an EPD, you know, an environmental product declaration, if it's got this, you know, fuel burn from South Korea all the way to Texas? How are we being sustainable? You know, and what is the true embodied carbon cost there? And so there's, again, it's like this really well-intended approach to simply limiting cement is creating all of these other problems. And what are you guys seeing out there in your neck of the woods?
Well, we're all learning as we go here. So, like you said, folks aren't thinking of the long-term implications of changing from the Type 2 to the Type 1L cement. It's just showing up on jobs. So, you know, for us, we're, you know, we get someone invites us to bid on a job. We get the drawings, the specifications, and then we dig in and we find out what they want us to price. Then we go out to our suppliers and vendors and get the pricing accordingly. I think that was the motion that we went through for you know, a majority of my career, the last, you know, oh my gosh, almost 2.5 decades. But I think what we're gonna have to do though is kind of look at what, you know, what's on the menu, I guess, versus just taking it and turning it over to the vendors and getting pricing, because as you're saying, we're seeing some issues with Type 1L cement. Low breaks is the big concern at the moment. But then again, I don't know if, you know, necessarily if 1L is, and I know the answer as I'm saying it, 1L is the sole culprit of it all. I think it's just that we're coming up with mixed designs and maybe looking at it, and you might see this too, is it 1L is a 1-for-1 with Type 2, and maybe that's not the case. So they're just replacing it 1-for-1, and then there's no change in the mixed designs, and maybe that's the issue that we're having. But as far as the availability of it, it seems to be. I don't know of it, at least in my area. It specifically like, hey, we're low on 1L, or we can't use it, or whatever. It's over here. It's, if you hear any shortage, it's just cement, and and as far as fly ash and stuff, I mean, I remember not too long ago that you when a ready mix supplier sent you over a quote, they had the you know, 100% Portland cement price, and then you got a fly ash mix price, and usually the fly ash was a little bit cheaper, but now you're just seeing you're not getting those options anymore. It's just, this is it. This is what you get. This is what we can get our hands on. There's no other options. So yeah, it's very it seems very fluid right now, and that's the kind of the reason, for the podcast, is for us to talk through these things, because I don't know how many folks are actually talking about this stuff. They're just being, and I've asked this before for folks. I was like, who's given the direction, saying, hey, we need to reduce our carbon footprint, and this is the way you're going to do it. Like, this is how you do it, and then do the architects and engineers just do what they're told, and just like you were telling me before, that the guy said, hey, we're gonna reduce our cement by 70%, which that seems insane to me, and no one goes, excuse me,
Right.
how's that going to work? Yeah. So, but as far as what we're trying to do as concrete contractors is get ahead of those things, and trying to educate the general contractors, the developers out there. We're trying to get a hold of them ahead of time and say, hey, these are the concerns that we have with these mixed designs, and try to get it out in front of them before we get too far. And the good GCs out there are reaching out to us and saying, hey, this is the challenge that's been put upon us. This is the sustainability requirements on this project. How do we get there? And then what concerns do you have on how we get there? So we're seeing some of that over here too.
Yeah. I think to answer your question, you asked, how are people becoming, number one, informed, and then what is the process of how they come up with a solution? And I think, in a maybe oversimplistic view, there's, number one, the concern for a more sustainable future, and that idea drives your big builders, your property management groups, your developers, your financiers to, number one, they've got to compete with each other. So everybody rushes to make these bold, commitments, for, Brookfield Properties, or Hines, any of these groups have made some very serious commitments, and they are deadly serious about hitting their targets. And so then this filters out through the design, engineering, and design build community, and it's basically been told, hey, if you're going to respond to any of our requests for proposal, you need to have a solution on how you're going to be low carbon for your steel, for your cladding, for operations, certainly for your concrete, because that's a big driver of embodied carbon and global warming potential, right? And so you've got all of these highly smart people and very, very capable teams needing to, get their deliverable in, which is, their request for, their proposal or their marketing package, whatever it is. And they sort of look for whatever is, the loudest or maybe even low-hanging fruit. And I think the loudest messaging that you hear from right now is from your ready-mix suppliers. And that is, if you're going to reduce cement, then this is how you're going to do it. And if you're going to go low carbon, you need to go with slag or fly ash, something we sell, right? It's got to be within our distribution network. And I don't think it was intentional. I think it's, they sell, to use the metaphor, they sell hammers, right? And so when they're going to solve a problem as it comes to them, they're going to try and, hammer in all the nails. They're not necessarily going to be aware of technologies or methodologies outside of their distribution network. I had one guy, a national technical guy for one of these trade organizations, and because we were talking about how there's so many different domestic pozzolans that you can use, dry add-on, different types of lightweight aggregate, liquid silica, which I'm a huge fan of, cellulose fibers. I've got to look up this new thing that somebody turned me on to Texas or Oklahoma called red mud concrete. I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but somebody's having success with it. And so there are all of these things that are not generally in the wheelhouse of your traditional ready mix distributor, right? And this technical guy goes, there are a lot of ways to be low carbon and to potentially be more cost effective. But he's like, our membership is ready mix suppliers. We're not going to do anything that's going to cause them to leave our organization by promoting things that are not selling their products. It's just not going to happen. And so you've got this scenario now on one hand where we're dealing with these shortages and we're dealing with these deformities that are happening in concrete because of these intense material changes. But at the same time, and I use this talking with an airport, and they do something like 100 trucks a day in concrete, right? And they were like, if you could just help us a little bit with price, with material sourcing, with anything, it would help us keep our schedules, avoid delays. And I said, okay, the first thing that we're going to have to do is work with our ready mix supplier and let them know that we're going to be using alternative, SCMs, not just slag, not just fly ash. And there's going to be a fight there because right now they've essentially, overbooked everybody for the flight. And then when you show up to get your concrete, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, but we can offer you a $200 voucher if you want to fly tomorrow. That kind of thing. They've already got everybody's money. And like you said, you're going to get what you're going to get. And as a supplier, that's an amazing place to be in. Even if you're hurting getting your own supply, when you literally have people lined up outside the door and you're calling the shots on the price and when it's going to be delivered, how much you can have, that's a tough spot to be able to be in. Now, I think luckily though, because the construction pace is still so strong, and in any real measure, I don't see slowing down. They're going to have to do something, and there will be threats from different distribution channels, which is, and competition is a good thing. And so I think you'll see a lot more of that. But yeah, it's an interesting situation right now, definitely on not just the supply level, but constructability, pricing. In some parts of the country, slag is getting pretty close to the price of cement. And you're like, well then just give me cement, except they don't have it, So what do you do? What do you do? So something's going to have to change, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many. I think. Do you think that we're trying to solve this problem like across the board nationally with the same solution instead of like going and looking at wherever that specific project is and look around locally what's available, who the suppliers are, who the contractors are in that area, and say, okay, this is the goal. This is what we want to achieve. How do we do it within this area that we have, instead of dragging fly ash or slag across the country or from other countries or wherever else, and saying, hey, because that's what it feels like what we're doing is, and this could go in all kinds of different spectrums in life right now, but we're like we got one solution for everything and everywhere, right? And that's how concrete is right now. This is the solution. We're all going to do type 1L cement. That's how we're going to get to our goal. Or it seems like I don't know. Then my tinfoil hat comes on. It's like, all right, who's behind this all of a sudden cement shortage, and why is type 1L cement that's been around? It's been around for decades. now it's popular. Um, are we dealing with a shortage of type 2 cement, and someone's like, okay, how do we make this cement, the amount of cement that we have available, how do we make it go further?
Sure.
All right, well, let's start adding stuff to it and cutting it down, and then we'll come up with a reason why we need to use it.
Yeah,
So,
I think you. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you just identified perhaps one of, maybe the biggest problem, and that is a one-size-fits-all solution over a variety of geographies. And I know I don't need to tell you, if you're, our aggregates different from state to state, region to region, freeze thaw temperature. You can remove a lot more cement in Florida than you can in Ontario or Missouri. Missouri's got huge fluctuations in hot and cold, and you need to take those elements into account. And so, yeah, so for maybe some climates, you can remove some pretty exciting amounts of cement. In others, you can do it, but you need to realize you're going to pay a price. Number one, probably in shortening the life cycle of that facility, which then also increases your embodied carbon footprint. And there are some solutions that regionally are going to be different. And it sounds like I'm picking on Missouri a lot. Just in my mind, traditionally, again, they've got a huge supply, usually, a surplus of fly ash. So that sounds like it could be a great solution as part of lowering cement content there. But maybe not so much in other parts of the country. And in a successful, truly low carbon program, right, as you and I have just talked about, you've got to take in then the measurement of what is the distance that material is traveling. I would also add, I don't know how much you guys are seeing the requirements for environmental product declarations. I like the idea, and they're still relatively new, and so they're kind of being fleshed out a little bit. You'll see requirements for compressive strength and sort of other structural elements, but there really isn't a requirement of what type of concrete you're ending up with. And so maybe some additional benchmarks for permeability, right? I mean, as Dr. Tyler Lake, Oklahoma State University, the concrete freak. Oh, I love watching that guy's episodes. As he says in multiple, lectures and videos, good concrete is low permeability concrete. Low permeability concrete is good concrete. And so somehow that needs to be, the quality of what we're making, that needs to be included as a quantifiable objective. And I don't think we're doing that. There's a lot of focus on the constituent materials, individually, but then as they come together to create concrete, what type of concrete are you creating? And that absolutely has to be on the menu, I think. And I think that will come. There's, only so many liquidated damages and, hemorrhaging of contingencies and stuff that the AEC community can do in this current pursuit of low carbon. Something's going to have to change. Your insurance companies are going to get upset. Like, didn't we already pay for this build? And so I think that will sort of naturally come about on a larger share of the market. But that's something that we try to do mostly successfully. day in and day out is sort of, take that next leap to approaching new ways of curing, thinking about setting up your documents in a more integrated approach with the supplier, with the people that will actually be building it, and combining training for everybody instead of these well-meaning but oftentimes kind of heavy-handed approaches. I don't think anybody's trying to be, malicious or mean about it. They're taking embodied carbon very seriously. So they throw something really dramatic out there without understanding exactly what it's going to take to get there. Yeah, I think it's also better to have, at least initially, that this low carbon sort of future that we're entering into, it's a learning curve. Make as many mistakes now, and learn from that. It's unavoidable, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've beat up what the problems are. So, what is what are some of the things that you think are successful out there? Like, I was gonna say, is there anyone out there? I guess since you're way into specifications and trying to bridge that gap and get everybody on the same page, is there anyone out there that's just doing the going back to the performance specification versus dictating on what the ingredients of the concrete is? Like, are you seeing any of that? Are we going back to that at all?
I think so, and fundamentally, you're also seeing a shift, particularly in which reference standards are or are not being included in these documents. With these higher water demands, a lot of your surface supplied water approaches, ASTM 309, C1315, your membrane kind of stuff, your silicate curing, which was arguably not so great to begin with, even when we had richer cement mixes to begin with. When you've got these increased water demands and you've got slag and you've got PLC and the limestone, which is a finer, multifaceted little bits, it requires a lot of water. And you've got cement, kiln dust, which can be highly alkaline. So you've got all of these things demanding more water, and you still have a lot of people, trying to spray down a silicate. Particularly you see it, when the concrete is still fresh and there's no lime to react with. People will be out there bug spraying it down, and that is coming from specifications. That direction, it's in the spec. If somebody wants to work on this project, then the estimator's got to put forward numbers for that approach.
Are you talking about colloidal silica, spraying that down? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about silicates. Colloidal silica is a bit of a different beast, and that is an area of improvement over the last 15 years, which I think is helpful, particularly if you're trying to be low carbon, whether you're using it as a spray-on, and you'll see it in densifiers, finishing aids, a lot of different sort of topical products. But I think what is on some of the formulations of those types of products that are most exciting are the internally cured types of liquid SCMs or liquid admixtures, where you're supplying the water evenly throughout the entire matrix of the slab. Those are very, very exciting. And we've been very, very lucky. I got exposed to those technologies, I don't know, back in 2013, 2014. And unless I'm directed otherwise, we will usually adopt some style of an internal curing approach. Cellulose fibers are also great at helping dry shrink prevention because of how they interact with the hydration cycles. They also don't tend to clump up as much as some of your steel fibers, in mixes and things like that. Um, and I think, but in order to have that sort of be on the table, it's already got to be in the documents. Otherwise, people don't know to be looking at it. And so I am seeing a shift away from silicate and surface supplied water curing into more internal curing, including your traditional sort of lightweight pre-wetted aggregates of clay and shale that have a lot of benefits too. Internal curing is very, very old, but traditionally in modern times has been used in kind of infrastructure construction, bridge decks, highways, that kind of stuff. But we just did a project in downtown San Francisco for architectural topping slab. Turned out beautifully, and it had some of these magic ingredients for lower carbon cement, but the hydration was better, so the curing was better, so the permeability was reduced, so you still have good concrete. And I think you're going to see a lot more of these different elements. What was the one also? Tyler Lay was the video. I haven't watched it yet, but he's going like this, and it's all about pulp cure, and it sounds like some sort of like recycled paper materials that are maybe better than blankets and burlap, that kind of stuff. There's a whole host of things, and I think with regional considerations, as you alluded to, for materials, for temperature, things like that, I think it's going to be a multifaceted approach to coming up with solutions.
Yeah, that your experience with the internal cure, there's no curing, no chemical cure, no wet curing when using that product.
Yes and no. So, if particularly, let's say, if you were doing a museum quality polished concrete topping slab, I would probably want to combine internal curing with a traditional wet curing, even just like 3 days, because then you don't have that water going anywhere. For your kind of day-to-day normal construction, whether it's warehouse and logistics or the new restaurant down the street, I think internal curing would be probably more cost effective in that, because as you mentioned, you're not doing some of the cure and seal. So boom, there's depending on where you are in the country, there's 20 to 30, 35 cents a square foot taken off of the schedule immediately. And one of the things that is also nice about that with fuller hydration is that your schedules, you don't have the same delayed day of strength considerations. So even if you're removing some amount of cement, your wait days are a lot shorter. On a project in Florida, we removed 50% cementitious, and we were polishing on that slab by like day 6 or 7, turning it over. Wow. Yeah. And so we had removed a lot of cement. But again, it's Florida, and we had great temperatures. We were at the time, we were like right in between, I don't know, I want to say like 65 and 70 when we were happening to do it. So we were able to have continual curing. It didn't stop. Nothing started flashing. But that doesn't mean you can't do it in other places. On another project where we were not removing cement, there might have been, a token, 8-10% fly ash, something like that. Core and shell were already up, and we turned over a like 35,000 square foot slab, poured, placed, finished, and polished in 4 days, and gave back a couple of weeks to the schedule. And so there are a lot of great ways. There are like new paradigms that are sort of entering the concrete market, and I think ultimately what you will see is sort of a combination of, like, I love Portland limestone cement, and it's such an easy way to cut embodied carbon by anywhere from 8 to 10%, but it's got workability issues. I know that in Los Angeles, I was talking to an architect. They're a pretty prolific design firm there, and some of the ready-mix supply groups are gradually sort of introducing it into the market in like 5% increments, because the flat work finishers are like, what's up with this concrete? It's drinking up all my water. It feels gritty when I'm trying to ride over it. So some of the behavioral differences are different. And the project that we did in Florida, which was type 1L, we did not have those issues because we were providing that water through internal curing. So it allowed us to get the benefits of the Portland limestone cement, but not have those sort of inherent negative behavioral characteristics that can come with it. So I think it'll be a combination.
Yeah. Yeah, because the architect and engineer's not even thinking about that end of things as far as the finishability till he gets out there and they're doing the punch list. They're like, oh, this looks like crap.
Right. Right.
And then it impacts them. Then they start asking questions, and by that time it's too late.
It's too late. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times you get contractors then that are going to be unfairly on the hook for items that were out of their control. There's an article I did with Dr. Ray Taylor, she's a fantastic cement scientist, material scientist. Did a lot of the studies on Roman harbor concrete. Why is it still load bearing despite being in the Mediterranean Sea for 2,500 years? And another big brain, Keith Robinson, who does specifications for Dialogue, Canada's largest architectural firm. And the article is called Changing the Language of Concrete. And at the beginning of the article, we talk about how everybody speaks differently about concrete, and contractors will tend to view the documents as like this is what you're asking us to do. This is what you're asking us to price. And designers are kind of like, yeah, well, I threw this document together, but I sort of want you to interpret it for me and make sure it all turns out okay. And so you've got these two different approaches to the documents. And a designer can't, on one hand, demand, essentially, right, contractually bind somebody, this is what you're going to do. And then when it turns out bad, say, well, gosh, Mr. Contractor, you didn't interpret it the way I would have interpreted, and so it leads to confusion. It leads to every, 4 or 5 weeks of additional RFIs and meetings that nobody wants to be at. And ultimately what happens is everybody dips into their contingencies and pays a little bit or tries to identify one person and have them do it. I think ultimately there needs to be a shift in some of the messaging that's coming out from Portland Cement Association, National Ready Mix Association, California Nevada Cement Association. It's great that you want to make these material changes. You've got amazing solutions that, if implemented properly, will not only create low carbon outcomes, but also high quality, good concrete outcomes. And that has to be a marriage of integrated design, meaning, talking not just with your ready mix supplier, gosh, I don't want to pick on designers and engineers too much because they're my bread and butter. and I love them, but a lot of times they get very excited and they'll sit through, a manufacturer trade organization lunch and learn. They get an AIA credit, they get a sandwich or a cup of soup, and they're told kind of follow this format, and they've got a deliverable that's due Friday or maybe the next Friday, and so they incorporate some of those changes without having perhaps a more informed, holistic approach. And so I think ultimately they're going to have to spend a little more time doing deeper research. And I also think suppliers who know their materials better than anyone else need to be thinking of, okay, we're not just making ingredient changes, we're making material changes, and we need to be responsible for that as well.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't think they're going to take the time to do that. So they'll keep you busy, Chris. So.
I suppose there's that. That's, if somebody's breaking windows, then I suppose there'll always be a window repair, right?
That's right. All right, man. I think this is a good spot to leave it today. We'll definitely get you back on the podcast. There's more to explore here, and as we've mentioned, I think we're all learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all learning as this thing goes, and I bet you in 12 months from now we'll look back and say, what we were doing.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly. I'll come back and I'll tell you what I find out about red mud concrete.
There you go. But Chris, if folks want to reach out to you and get some help on specs and interpreting specs, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just pop by the website, www.bennettbuild.us. Bennett, like my name, build is in build a building, and .us, the greatest country on earth, the United States of America.
There you go. And I'll share your email address when we post this too, so folks can reach out to you. So, Chris, I appreciate coming on the show today, and we'll have to do it again.
Hey, Seth, thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Thank you for joining us for another Concrete Logic podcast episode. If you got some value out of this or you enjoyed it, please share it with others. And if you could take a moment and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app, I would appreciate it. We will catch you on the next episode. And now Mike Dunton's going to take us out.
That alarm always sings couple hours before the sun comes up. Open up the side, put some diesel in the lights, and wait till the trucks roll up. Yeah, this ain't how most folks live their lives, dripping in sweat, working overtime, while they tie their ties for their night.